Yes, we have several. So from committee members, we have councillors Emma Spagnola, Councillor Saul Penfold, Adam Varley, Christopher Cushing, Peter Fisher, and then we also have apologies from Councillor Richard Kershaw, who would be the cabinet member for the HAS report today, but we have officers in attendance to account for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Substitutes.
Yes, we have Councillor Nigel Pearce for Councillor Christopher Cushing, and we have Councillor Gerard Mancini Boyle for Councillor Peter Fisher.
Okay, thank you both for that. Item 3, the public questions and statements. I believe we have one speaker in the for public statements today. Is that correct?
Yes, we have Michael Hicks from North Walsham, who is a resident and business owner of many years. If he'd like to come to the front and we can set you up with a microphone.
Mr. Hicks, would you like to come and join us and to speak in the microphone from the front here, please?
Oh, good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have a word. 3 minutes, I fear, is not a tenth of the time I need, as your colleague over there, Mr. Young and Mr. Kershaw, I'm not sure who's here. I did speak to them last week about North Walsham. I've lived in North Walsham for 82 years. I've went to school there, I work there, I have businesses there, and I'm very, very, very concerned about the town. I know later on this morning you're going to discuss in detail what's going on in the town. I also realise that a lot of you people here have nothing to do with North Walsham at all. It's just something else you have to discuss. But for me and other business people in town, we are passionate about the town. Everywhere I look here in the council offices downstairs, there's an awful lot about nostalgia for North Walsham. The centre of North Walsham was gutted in the 1970s for what was considered to be progress. That concrete edifice still sits there and is no good. The marketplace is dying. You have 3 supermarkets. You have Waitrose, Lidl and Sainsbury's, all of whom offer a wide selection of goods, including clothing. So the clothing shops have gone out of the town. All the other things have gone out of the town that were vibrant and kept the town busy as a market town. Yes, we still have the market on a Thursday. But when it comes to the marketplace on other days, there is no footfall. I realise the work is going on at the moment, but when it's finished, we shall have some very pretty flower beds, we shall have some lovely seats, we shall have lovely premises to look at, but will there be any people? I doubt it. If you talk to anybody, you listen to the reports on the radio about firms pulling out of the market towns, they're pulling out because there is no trade there. So where's the trade gone? The trade has gone to places, as I said, like the 3 supermarkets in North Walsham, which are a modern necessity. We can't do anything about that, but we've got to do something about the middle if it's going to survive. And you know, what brings it home to me is the fact that if you, in North Walsham, if you go to the doctors and you get a prescription, you have to come to the marketplace to 2 of the chemists there. There is one on the outside, but in the marketplace there's 2. But to go to the chemist, I had it complained to me, they have to pay £1.20 to park to go to the chemist to pick up a prescription. That can't be right. Only today, I had somebody say to me that they want to take their elderly father to the hairdresser. There's nowhere to park anywhere near the hairdressers and they can't stop. So the father didn't get to the hairdresser. And you know, a pound of apples in Waitrose, a pound of apples in Lidl, a pound of apples in Sainsbury's is 50 pence. If you want to go to the shop in the marketplace, it's £1.20 to go and spend 50 pence. Can't be right. Can't be right. So the one thing that would make the market town and possibly all other market towns, like Dereham, a hub, is free parking. That is the incentive to bring them to the town. Why would you come to North Walsham? What is there left in history? There's nothing. There's a church and a market cross. That's all. So what brings them to the middle of the town to shop? The incentive should be free parking. If a levy could be put to the 3 supermarkets, as happens in Norwich, to protect the quieter lanes in Norwich and the alleyways in Norwich, They draw a revenue from the big stores that is equal to the car parking revenue of the year. That then gives a level playing field for the marketplace shops. Otherwise, they're at a disadvantage.
Mr. Hicks, could I ask you, you've had your 3 minutes.
Thank
Could
you.
I ask you to conclude, if you wish to, a concluding sentence?
Yeah, all I would say that this might be a revolutionary idea, but I'm sure it would work to give the market towns a chance to survive. North Walsham next spring, and you can't drive into the town until next spring. So all the shopkeepers for Christmas in the marketplace are at a distinct disadvantage to the supermarkets. Let's get North Walsham alive again. Let's rejuvenate the historic parts and make it interesting.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We will take into account the points that you've made when we consider the matter later on in our agenda. You're welcome to stay and listen to that if you wish, but we'll understand if you wish to leave before then.
Well, I'm happy to go back any time.
All right. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Turning to the next item on our agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting of the 28th of September, and they will be considered at our next meeting on the 9th of November. So there's been not enough time to compile those. We'll consider those together with today's meeting minutes on that occasion. Item 5 is items of any items of further urgent business.
None received.
Thank you. Item 6 is declarations of interest in respect of today's business. The guidance is within our paper today. Does anybody have any interest to declare in relation to those? Councillor Holliday.
I have a pecuniary interest in item 11, for which I have a dispensation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware.
None received.
Thank you. Consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of it.
None on today's agenda.
Thank you. Item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee reports or recommendations.
Just to note that the cabinet accepted those recommendations in relation to the CCFA report on the impact of second homes and holiday lets. I believe those bills are now on a second reading. I think we've missed some of the consultation response deadlines for those, but we will be preparing and response to the relevant cabinet minister to show support for those and also express there the as stated in those recommendations the belief that increased council tax revenue, if that was to be passed in future, is retained by the district council.
Okay, thank you very much. So they're set out on items 1 to 5 on the page there. So thank you for that. Turning to item 10. Item 10 is the waste contract update. So that's a briefing from Serco regarding the new collections model. And today we have 2 members of Serco joining us. We've got Mr. Aylward, who I believe is the regional director. Is that correct? Yes. I know you've been before. And we have Mr. Roche. I think this will be your first visit. Will it be? Okay, thank you. And we've got Officer Martin at the end as well. So we've got the director here as well. So we've got as good a lineup as you're going to get, I think. I think I will hand over to Mr. Hems just to give a brief.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Why do we not have any briefing papers in our pack? Why don't we have any briefing notes or anything?
I don't know whether we asked for, did we ask for a briefing paper prior to the meeting?
We did suggest that if they wanted any to share any slides, they could, but we weren't provided with any.
Maybe we can cover that.
Chair, my understanding is this is a verbal update to the committee and an opportunity for the committee to ask questions of Serco I'm happy in the future if you want a briefing paper on the issues to provide, or to ask Serco to provide one. George and myself did discuss the potential sharing of the gap analysis, which is being provided by Serco to us, but is yet to be agreed or fully discussed with officers of the three authorities. And so at this stage, it was decided until it was discussed amongst the officers, it would be premature to share with members, because some of the suggested dates by Serco for completion of some items were, I think, on the part of officers from the three authorities, felt to be a bit generous, and we wanted to tighten on those. But I'm happy to give a bit of an update in due course, and I'm happy, once we've agreed that, to circulate it around to members in order to so that members can see what is proposed and what's being worked on currently. But there will be a verbal update provided as part of that by Mr. Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. You know, I'm quite happy that we have a verbal update, but I think it would be nice to have an outline and briefing papers for the future. I'm not suggesting they need to be detailed in the extreme, but I think outlined would be very helpful for us and helpful for any creative responses and any scrutiny we might wish to apply. Perhaps be guided by you on this one.
I think, as a matter of principle, that's the best practice. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This harks on to what we said at the last meeting regarding the North Horsham matter. We, as Overview and Scrutiny, are there to overview and look at things. How can we look at things if we don't have it in black and white? I find it a little bit incomprehensible that we have to put up with a verbal update without any written confirmation or feedback to read. And I think we should have, if anything comes to Overview and Scrutiny, we have an agenda. I'm sorry, I think we should have pre-printed reports.
Okay, I think we've made the point there.
Chair, noted, and we'll make sure for the future, but for the record, we were previously being asked for a verbal update by the committee, having provided written responses or written papers in the past. We were asked to update on the progress around those, which is the reason. I do note that you would like a written report for future updates, and we will make sure that we provide one.
I think that would be helpful, if only in outline, then that would be a useful step. But let's move on to, did you want to do anything further regarding an introduction today?
If I may, Chair, members of the committee that will recall Serco being present before will note that there's a slight different lineup, as has been stated. Peter Aylward, who's the regional director, has been to see you on previous occasions, but George Roach is new to the contract. So you may remember that Emma Windle came previously. She has moved on, and George has come in from a different part of the Serco contract business in order to be the senior contracts manager across the three authorities. So he has responsibility across the contract as a whole. So just a reminder, this is a single contract with Serco that is across three district councils, ourselves, Breckland and Kings Lynn. And although they operate those from three depots, it is run as a single contract on behalf of the three authorities. And so some of the things that are pertinent to North Norfolk will be only pertinent to North Norfolk. Some of the things will be pertinent across. So, for instance, the gap analysis, which you will get an update on today as part of George's presentation update. Obviously, we have to work on with the three authorities together in order to agree that. But in terms of the target operating model, the other two councils have been through their target operating model mobilisation and introduction already. And so the issues around the target operating model that George will share is only relevant to North Norfolk at this time. I think I think at this point, it's best to hand over to George and Peter to present anything they want. I think the most important thing is an opportunity for members to ask any questions. I think you will understand that we are in regular and frequent communication with Serco as officers, and I've got Officer Martin with me at the end there, who has been in daily meetings with Serco about in particular some of the performance issues around the target operating model that we've seen over the last few weeks since its introduction. But I'll hand over now to George Roach, who can give you an update, if that's all right, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll actually jump in. I think if we cover the gap analysis first, and then we can move on to the service provision. So good morning, everyone. I think this is now the third time I've had the privilege to be here. Peter Elwood, a regional director. So some may not know what the gap analysis is. Towards the end of last year, the beginning of this year, the authorities looked at the method statements that had been provided as part of the contract. There are schedules as part of the contract to items which were potentially delivered, not delivered, partially delivered, to be delivered with Tom. This then actually got the name as being a gap analysis. So part of Serco's task was to go through those. There were actually 600 items, to go through each of those 600 items and determine which ones we believed we had already delivered, were being delivered as part of the TOM, or had not been delivered. So we consider at the moment, roughly speaking, the numbers are a slightly movable object, but there's roughly about 70 or 80 items that we feel that haven't been as yet delivered. And some of those now, probably about 30% of those, we have provided dates where we plan to deliver those. And the rest of the items, we've requested meetings with the three authorities to discuss the context and the content of some of them, because it's unclear what some of the deliverables actually are. And then to agree what the deliverables would be, and when we would deliver them, should they still be required. Some of them have been superseded by other things, so that's why it's slightly a movable object. So I'm happy to answer any questions on those if there are any.
Councillor Buttercover.
Thank you. Can I ask, you just said that you were still to deliver these 70 or 80, and you weren't clear what some of those 70 or 80 were. Surely when you wrote the contract, you knew what was going to need to be delivered.
So
I'm sure that was made clear to you.
So a lot of these are in method statements. So a lot of these were not actually requirements of Serco. These were items which Serco had put in there as added value. And some of them, let's say, the text has been, so these are free-flowing documents. They're not answers to questions that were put in a requirement. Free-flowing documents, we will do this, we will do this, we will do this. And some of it's unclear what the meaning of some of the statements. They are statements that were sort of been taken potentially out of context, because let's say there's 5 paragraphs of wording. One statement's been taken out of the middle of a paragraph and put in this as a line item. So some of that needs then what is actually required. So that's where the content and the context needs to come in. So the vast majority of them were not, we will deliver. Some of them were, these are our value added items, but it's unclear in totality as to what some of them are.
Okay, I still believe that if you've got in a contract that you're going to deliver something, there is a requirement upon you when you take on a contract to understand fully the responsibilities of that contract and know with both partners what you're going to deliver. But let's hear what the rest of what you got to say, and maybe it'll become clear. Or
I fully agree with you. I suppose the difficulty is the people who wrote those method statements are no longer in the company. So now it's upon us. I've been within this context now about 12 months now. So it's to sit down with the authorities and hopefully come to an agreement on what was meant, what we meant and what was understood. We're obviously interpreting what we meant because we didn't write the method statements. So the idea is to come to an agreement with the authorities what the deliverable could be and should be, and then a date and that it can be delivered.
Just to follow up from that, I mean, I think this is the third time that you've come to speak to us. I think probably of all the things that you've said to us, maybe that particular line was one that we'd not heard before and would have given us, I think, cause to have a conversation along the lines that we are this morning at an earlier point. I have a very good recollection of the gap analysis and the discussions that went along with that. And I think we had the opportunity of taking an overview on that, but I don't recall there being any what I would call vagueness around what was to be achieved. I think I do recall that there were some matters that need to be discussed in terms of how were they still relevant, had they been overtaken by other things that might be negotiated away in that, but I don't recall there being a significant area of vagueness, I have to say. But we'll park that matter there and just open up for further questions. I'm conscious that I think the context of today's briefing is not just about the gap analysis here. This is about the introduction of the new target operating model and the kind of problems that I think have manifested themselves in the last few weeks. And certainly I can speak for myself on having had quite a bit of feedback on miscollections and things that have not gone too well. So I don't want to get too deeply involved with the kind of street by street, ward by ward, but I would like to hear from you your perspective on how the last few weeks have gone and how you perceive the customer experience out and around North Norfolk District. That would be helpful.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So I just want to give you a brief update on some of those points that you just covered and just sort of where we are with the new target operating model that was introduced. So the new target operating model was introduced on the 5th of September. As Steve said, this is the third one that we've done for the Norfolk waste contracts. So we did Bretland and Kings Lynn prior to this one. The North Norfolk change was the biggest change of the three authorities within the contract. And when I say the biggest change, it meant 90% of day changes for the residents across the borough. What used to happen with the collection methodology is we used to do it in zones across the borough. So we used to move through 5 zones. The new collection methodology is a near and far model. So where we'll travel to the furthest points of the district and do collections, come back to the tip site and then do more collections on the second load in a local area. The reason for this change was, one, to reduce mileage, to help reduce carbon, so that we're not having vehicles traveling across the borough back and forwards to the tip site, and also to reduce the time taken for some of the rounds, which is the reason behind the methodology for the change. In all of our target operating models that we put forward, we normally have a sort of 12-week period where we do see disruptions to the service, which do take place over a 12-week cycle. The collections that we do here are a fortnightly collection, so you can break that into 6 blocks of 2 weeks. We're effectively in the middle of that at the moment. So we're currently into week 5 of our collections. Just thinking through in my head, sorry, we're into week 6 of our collections now. So we're almost halfway through our 12-week cycle of putting them through. We have seen a higher number of miscollections than we would like to see. We are, however, seeing those miscollections starting to come down over the cycles. So in the first cycle of 2 weeks, compared to the second cycle of 2 weeks compared to the first cycle, we saw a 20% reduction in miscollection worksheets coming through to us. We've seen a further 10% reduction coming into the cycle where we are now. What we see is the crews learning the new areas where we have 90% day changes for the residents. That's also meant our crews are in new areas. So the crews are having to learn where they're going, which has meant that for some of the smaller out of the way areas where, for instance, the bins might be around the corner, they're not necessarily presented at the front of the property. Some of those are some of the areas that we've had to actually learn and take on board. From Serco's point of view, we increased our resources in our call center to make sure that we can handle the increased volume of calls that we've had coming through. So we have put more resource into the call center run by Serco to take on those calls. We also increased the number of trucks that we have available to us. So we have at present 4 or 5 extra hire trucks on the contract to help us with that. And the last step was to increase the number of driver resources that we have. And this is where we have struggled over the last 5 weeks, is increasing the number of drivers available on the contract. It's to do with the national driver shortage that is still going on. So we are struggling to find drivers to give us that support function that we would have had to decrease the number of misses and the length of time that it takes to recover those misses, and also put out support crews to help out with the crews. So all of our frontline staff are out. We have seen the completion rates increasing as well. So in week 1 and 2, we had quite a few of our crews not completing their rounds. And this was due to local knowledge that they had, and we had additional support crews out. We're now at the point where we actually only have 3 of our crews that aren't completing their rounds. They're getting within 90 to 95%. And they are, again, some of that is local knowledge and just where they're having to go with the rounds. So understanding where the bins are, and they are moving towards a point where we will be in a space to complete all those rounds within the 8-hour day, is where we are. Is this where we'd like to be after 6 weeks? We would like to see fewer misses. Of course we would. Unfortunately, with the lack of drivers, that has meant that we've struggled a little bit with that. But we are seeing the reduction in the number of missed worksheets coming through to us. Open it up to the floor for questions if anybody's got questions regarding that.
Okay, thank you. I've got several hands that have gone up. I'll take them in the order that they appear. Can I just ask you, following on from the point that I made earlier, there are some, I think, perceptions around, and these are what I've been fed back from the customers, if you like, is that there had been no or insufficient familiarity with the rounds. And I take your point about perhaps some out of the way rural locations, but I'm aware of significant areas that have been missed as a whole. And so I'm talking about a whole road or a whole area that have been missed. So there seems to be that factor, and there also seems to be a shortage of resources to pick up those miscollections. So, okay, that happened yesterday. So what can you do today that will pick those up? And I think from the customer's point of view, there are 2 points that have been made. Just to kind of perhaps introduce a little bit of balance into this, because it's not all negative actually. But what the customer experience as well is that I think the customer experience over the last 2 years or so, and that's certainly since you've had the contract, and I'll go back a little further than that actually, I believe the customer satisfaction was very high with our waste collection services. And the contract changeover that we had in April, which was coincident with the height of COVID, that was the time when I expected the whole thing to fall apart. And I know it did fall apart in other areas, but it didn't seem to fall apart in ours. And I'm not saying everything was perfect, but given the circumstances, the challenge was there and you delivered on that. And I think that you actually had quite a good reputation up until the beginning of this changeover. And it's all fallen apart. And I have to say that in my experience, many of our customers have been very tolerant, actually, because some of them haven't reported their miscollections and have assumed that you'll pick them up in due course. Well, of course, that didn't happen. And so I'm certainly hearing of situations where people have gone several weeks and not had a collection. Now, I'm not saying how widespread that is. I'm just simply saying that there's something is gone very wrong very recently. And I'm not sure that I understand that you are cognizant of that from the customer experience point of view. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that if you were able to say something.
So we are very aware that customers haven't received the high level of service that Serco normally provides. However, having said that, that's not all customers. We have obviously, as I said, 90% of residents saw a change in their service with us, as did our crews. We are to put it in numbers. We are performing a lot of our collections as we should be going through. So we do have areas and pockets that are being affected worse than others. And what we're working through at a local level with my management team at the depot is just building some more heat maps on those so we can understand which areas are being affected worse than others, and we can put more resource into there. As I said, the area that we are struggling with resource is drivers to drive the dust carts. It's not a Norfolk problem. This is a national problem that we have with drivers. So actually putting drivers into the dust carts to drive them. We are taking some steps where we've got potentially support from the local officers. We have maps coming out from them where we can present those to the drivers who might not know the areas with photographs of where they need to go. And our customer service team is then also taking a more proactive role in where we have residents who have complained, is contacting them back again to find out if that solution has been put in place. Have they received their bin collection as they should? So sort of a follow-up on the initial complaint as well. So we are fully aware that we need to be increasing our customer perception as far as it goes. So we do need to focus on that. But with regards to resources, it is about just finding the drivers. So I am currently working with as many agencies as possible to find drivers, and within our local Serco teams to find more drivers that we can put on to have that additional resource. So where we have missed those bins, we can collect them as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I've got lots of people that are lined up for questions. I've got Councillor Pearce, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Batikofer, Councillor Grove-Jones and Councillor Adams in that order. So, right, okay. I'm open to takers. I'm open to takers. There's no two. Yes. Right. Okay. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, gentlemen. I note what our chairman says on your behalf, that before the changeover of routes, and I have to agree that I was really very happy with the way that the contract was performing. Not leaving everything to COVID, because that is a well-worn and pliable excuse now, although we're still suffering with it. I am concerned that with the failures, and they are failures because you've basically admitted them, of the service, I get emails from residents saying your customer service feedback is worse than your service. especially over holidays and weekends. Now, at the end of the day, you took on this contract knowing what it was, and that our residents just want to see their bins emptied once a week on a round or once a fortnight, whatever. And at the last bank holiday, I was hit with several emails of people that tried to ring your office, no reply, and they weren't going to get a collection. They got nothing on over the weekend, which has caused problems. Now, at the end of the day, we are a committee that expects to see results. And I come back to what I said about having written reports, and I'll leave it there. But really, gentlemen, is this contract working on what percentage basis do we have of the contract that's working correctly or not correctly? I like to see things broken down, because I'm not interested in the word heat maps or this or
Can I just
operating
stop you
models.
there? I'm just conscious of the clock and
I know.
I need to speak. So
I
can we do a
understand.
little-
But what's the percentage? Are you happy with the contract? And what is the percentage of success against the problems over the whole of our area? Thank you.
I'm struggling a little bit to understand the question.
I think it's quite simple, really.
Well, maybe you could rephrase it and then I can give
So,
you. attempt to give you an
Maybe
answer.
I can assist in this one slightly, because we did send, Scott Martin did send an email out to all members a couple of weeks ago, where he set out the percentage completion or percentage failure rate as the number of missed bins that had occurred over that period compared with the number of collections. And I seem to remember, Scott, you help me out.
0.0067%.
So that means that as a percentage of missed, Serco or had missed very few as the total collections. Bear in mind that they are collecting 55,000 bins per week, and so we are talking about a very small number. I think if we turn it on its head, that means that 99.9963% of bins have been collected correctly. And I think if you were to look at that as a success rate, there wouldn't be many organisations who would balk at having a 99.99% success rate in terms of collection. So in context, I think that the issue is we'd like 100%, and we'd like none of the issues that we're having in terms of the repeated mists that are going on, or people not having their collections on successive weeks. I think in part that is down to Serco not necessarily knowing about them, because as has been said, residents have been very tolerant and not necessarily reported it, assume it'll get next time. Some residents have quite a lot of capacity in their bins, and so it doesn't matter if their residual is missed, because I know from my perspective, my residual 240 residual bin could probably do 2 or 3 weeks before it gets full to the top. But that isn't the point. The point is we want residents to receive the service they expect and that we demand of Serco. So officers are working very hard with Serco, and I know Serco are putting in a lot of additional steps in order to try and to improve that situation. But I think we need to bear in mind that with something like this, where we have such significant change, there will always be some level of disruption. It didn't help that we had the bank holiday within 2 weeks, which clearly none of us were expecting. We asked Serco not to work that day because it would have been, I think, inappropriate for Serco to carry out collections. Serco had indicated that other contracts were allowing that to happen. Ultimately, there were no disposal points available for Serco to take their rubbish, their collected rubbish in any case, for the residual. But that had a significant impact for North Norfolk. Other districts, I know we had a big Saturday catch up, and most of the crews volunteered to go out on that Saturday and catch up, compared with some other authorities where I think they had very few crews go out, so they had to do that over a period of several weeks. So from our point of view, yes, it's not acceptable. As a percentage term, 99.99% were being collected, and what we're seeing is that George has shared with you, is that that missed rate is now falling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is about customer service. I asked at the briefing before the changeover, what about customer service? Because in the past, it hasn't been terribly good. And I was assured that not only would there be increased numbers, but there'd be increased training. But the problems I'm hearing is customer service. It's maybe very few number of people, but they get caught in a loop of incompetent, inefficient customer service, and they just can't escape. And it's not until I retrieve them and direct them into NNDC that they get any action. And I think that's poor. And I'm disappointed, having been reassured at the beginning that that wasn't going to be the case. And I've got another quick question, if that's okay. Was there an efficiency element to this target operating model, in that you were trying to get more done for this from each round? Because I get the feeling that people are in more of a hurry than they were before. No, the operatives are fantastic. I've got no criticism of them at all. They do a wonderful job. So this is all about the methodology, but I get the feeling they're rushing, they're dumping the bins in the middle of the road and just moving on. And I just wondered if there was an efficiency model as well as but I'm also interested in the customer service, which is inadequate. Thank you.
To answer your second question first, there is an efficiency and a carbon reduction that was aimed for the target operating model. So in the wave pattern that was done before, for instance, crews would have to do 2 tips if they were traveling to the east of the borough and the tip site is in the west. They would then have quite a long distance between that second tip and coming back on patch again. The new near and far methodology means they travel to the east, they come back to the west and tip, and then it's a short distance to the next collection section that they would be doing, which reduces the mileage on the trucks and therefore reduces the carbon as well. I think you've got to follow up on
that. Doesn't quite answer my question. My question was more time efficiency. I understand the carbon and the fuel efficiency, but are they operatives doing more in the same time? Because that's what the feeling that you get on the ground is, that they're hurrying.
So they're actually doing less driving than they were, and they're doing no more collections than they would have been done in the past. I think what you might be feeling is just where they are still learning some of the rounds. There is a sense of urgency because they want to try and get to the end of their round and complete it. So as they get more au fait with where they're going, that will then become a little bit calmer as far as we go. With regards to the customer call center that we have, so I've spent a lot of time. This is my second full week in post, but I was also up before that as well, just getting to learn the contract. Actually listening to the customer call center and listening to the calls that were being taken, and have spent some time with the manager listening to some of the calls that are taken as well. And we don't see the level of dissatisfaction that you're referring to within the calls that I'm listening to. So our customer care agents are trained. We do monitor their calls, and some of those calls are then escalated if they need to be up through the management team within the local depot. I think sometimes we do have a feeling that the residents don't get what they want on the call, and it's trying to make sure that we handle that correctly, and the customer call agents try and handle that as best as possible, but we're not seeing that same level that you're referring to. So if we have specific examples, I'll more than happily go back and do training with the guys based on those examples of the calls where they've seen them.
I think if you do have specific examples, if you provide them into Officer Martin, then he can follow those up with George. In terms of the action that we've taken as a district, Officer Martin has been down, I think either once or twice now, to the Watton depot and spent at where the call centre is located, and has spent a day there going through, listening to calls, and understanding the position and providing feedback into the call centre manager about some of his observations, etc. So I think we will see improvement in terms of volumes, because less people should be ringing into the call centre to report misses, because the misses are now going down. So hopefully that whole situation and cycle will begin to resolve itself. Thank you.
Okay. Done with that. Thank you. Councillor Buttercup.
Thank you. I think it's really important to put some context to around this, in as much as everybody across the district has a bin they want collected, more than one bin they want collected. It's not like a street light that might be in some roads and not in other roads, or education. So it's a service that all our residents use. And I think that's why when there becomes a problem, it becomes a big problem very, very quickly. But I think for me, it's been about this, we all understand mistakes happen. We all understand that a big change has been made and that previously the service was very good. But what we are struggling with is that customer service piece, because when something goes wrong, which it will, it's the way you handle that and put it right that makes the difference to the customer. And that is very, very important to us and to our residents, and has always been. And I think that would have been made clear when the contract was negotiated. And I find unless I go, I've written to you myself because I've been missed. I live very rural location, so fair enough. But I've had to write a couple of times to Officer Martin to get help and assistance because of the response I've had. And that's a personal experience. So I think, that's the thing for me is we understand mistakes happen, but we need to work to make sure less mistakes are happening. But I think what we've heard about the performance shows that it's not as bad as it feels to some people. But we need to make sure that when somebody has got a problem, we take it seriously and we act and fix it quickly. And so I'd like reassurance that that is going to happen, please. And my second question is a little bit more off the wall, but it's something that's sort of in the back of our heads, a couple of us wondering. Am I right in believing that Serco operatives in North Norfolk are on different terms and conditions to Serco operatives in other parts of the contract? Is that correct, or is that not correct? Because how whispers happen. I'd like to know, whether that's true or not, please. Thank you.
The second part, in terms and conditions, do you mean the general terms and conditions, or
Very specific, but I'm trying to be. I'm being very specific on what I'm asking here.
is it pay or terms
Yes,
and
it is
conditions?
pay.
Okay. No, they are equitable. Terms and conditions, they do vary, because when we took these contracts over, basically you 2p across the conditions that were in place, and they all vary slightly across the three. The rates for drivers and the rates for loaders and rates for operatives are the same.
With regards to the first part, just about customer services, we have been working very much with the customer service team, and what I've tried to put in place with Beth is actually that follow up on the initial complaint. And I think that's potentially where some of the perceptions coming across with, I know from my experience, if I make a complaint and I don't hear anything back, or alternatively with, the collection where we have struggled to recover those collections within 24 hours. If you as a resident are being told, well, leave your bin out and we'll get it, that doesn't quite work, because you're thinking, well, when are you going to get it? And that then gives you a very bad perception of the customer service. So we are trying to be more specific in when we will be getting back to collect the missed bins and give that information out. And that's something that I'm working with the local officers on as well. But also then just in a follow-up, so the customer service team are now following up on complaints as well. So if you have made a complaint, then they should be coming back to you just to double check. Now, it's something that I've only put in place recently. So you might not have seen that, but that's something that I spoke with Beth about at the end of last week, and making sure that we can start moving that through.
I think that sounds encouraging. And I hope that we see it continue, because some of the stories we've heard, none of us want to hear. I think it's really important too for our trade waste customers, because I had business within my district, within my area, that had, waste left outside their premises on two sets of the, you're talking about the blocks. And for them, obviously, that's also, it's not right for their business. It's cardboard. It wasn't going to cause a health issue, but it's a mess and it's not right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grove Jones.
Good morning. Well, I have to tell you that the operatives and the service that I've had where I live in Stalham has been excellent. You're getting a lot of brickbats from us here, but they've always been personable and helpful. Sometimes we do get the odd bin left in a silly place, but that just happens. There are just, I was aware that there had been some complaints about the answers to residents who ring up and say, oi, I haven't had my bin collected, you know, this sort of thing. And Serco, instead of saying, yes, we'll deal with it, actually sent the message back, ring North Norfolk District Council, which I think is unfortunate because the message had come through from Officer Martin to ring Serco to make a complaint, don't ask North Norfolk. So of course that puts people's backs up. There's also the fact that you'd altered the route, although you'd sent round plenty of time to tell people that it would be from the 5th of September. People don't like change. So to go from my collection was Monday to Wednesday threw me for a bit, even me, because, you know, you're so used to going out with your bin on a certain day and putting it out. There were the people who didn't read the notice, and so they didn't have their bins out, and those who weren't, there was a missed delivery. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. I'd hate to have your job to try and get everybody's bins collected. It's an absolute nightmare, but we do expect you to support and to deliver on time. And as I said, I have no problems with mine. I just get the odd complaint. Sometimes a road is left out, as Nigel knows with Houghton, etc. But basically, I just wanted to say, we're giving you a hard time, but it's not all bad news.
There we are. We're nothing if not balanced. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you. I might give you a bit more of a hard time here. I'm sorry about that. I am disappointed with the performance over the last fortnight, ignoring the first 4 weeks to a great extent. I expected some disruption as a result of what had to occur in terms of the rerouting and the unexpected events in terms of the additional bank holiday that occurred, of course. So I think the potential for disruption was understood by us as members, but it has carried on too long now, albeit yesterday was the first day where I had personally not received a complaint from somewhere across the district myself. So fingers crossed for today. I do feel it is lessening. The problem has been largely occurring, I would say 80% of the complaints that I've seen, but not exclusively, on lokes, alleyway collections, unadopted roads and other harder to find locations. But what I've seen besides that has been missed assisted collections, and as Sarah said earlier, commercial collections. I understand most, but perhaps not all members have seen complaints across the district. I don't think we've got problems in every area. And we are speaking about a relatively small number of households and an even small number of businesses overall. And I do certainly admire the crews for what they do and undertaking the additional collection routes, of course, as well, to try and get on top of these issues. But I cannot understand why this continues when the information on the bin locations, it's in the cab, it's on the computer tablet, and why Serco management hasn't assisted the drivers in finding these collections where the bin cannot be found, or where even a miss has been reported. As we've heard, some of those misses have occurred a second or even a third time. So there's clearly some processes that I think need to be improved urgently. Serco knew this was coming up. Were the resources not in place? That's my first question. Secondly, how long is it now going to take to get on top of these issues? And last, have you passed the details of the assisted collections and commercial collections down to the crews effectively? Thank you.
So in answer to those, we do normally see a 12-week process when we implement a TOM, and that's not just in North Norfolk, that would be anywhere. So when I introduced the service change in my last contract, again, we looked at a 12-week process where it would take for things to be completely settled again. So that's sort of the timeline that we'd look at. We're currently in week 6, so we're in the middle of that process as we go through. The information for assisted collections and commercial collections is passed down to the crew. As I said earlier, this was one of the biggest service changes that we've seen. So 90% of day changes, which has resulted in a lot of crews having to learn the new areas. So we are seeing a huge reduction in those misses for the hard to reach areas as that information is going down. It does still happen, and it's something that we're working with the crews actively to avoid, specifically with the assisted collections that comes down from there. And the third point about resources, we had the only resource that we're really struggling with is drivers, and that is due to the driver situation where we are currently. The rest of the resources we had in place, so we up resourced in the call center and on the vehicles and the loaders. It's actually just having somebody qualified to drive that vehicle is where we've struggled to put out the support crews. So that's not affecting our frontline service delivery. It's the support crews behind where we've struggled with that additional resource that's come in. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think, you know, Serco putting pressure on themselves by missing the bins, but also our own staff and a fair few of the members have you know lost hours of working time on this issue. It's been very disruptive and distracting from other work and responsibilities. We've seen a lot of frustrated residents and to a lesser extent commercial customers. I think we need to pull out the stops here to ensure those bins are being collected. 12 weeks certainly won't be acceptable to anyone if that's the number of missed bins they experience. I would certainly hope we're not missing that many bins, but time is ticking to get this right. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm slightly more laissez-faire about bin collection because I do assume that it will be collected. And so to me, perhaps a miscollection isn't a big thing. I've got better things to be getting on with, but it is a lot with our customers, and we have to consider our customers. But equally, we have to consider that we are part of a consortium investing 230 million in a contract. You started off by mentioning methodology, and it seems to me that if there was some cut and paste in that methodology, there's a suggestion that we need to review part of the methodology and the contract. Mr. Chairman might remember that I raised a point back in March, I think, about strategic planning. Now, we've known about driver shortages for a long time. We've had COVID, and that throughout the country has caused problems for everybody. And I did see in a Grant Thornton report that in another borough, you had not given the level of investment or innovation that was required for the contract that you were performing. So my question really is twofold. Firstly, are we looking at changing the methodology? Are we looking at reviewing the contract? And secondly, 3 questions. Secondly, I would like to know how the innovation and investment is going to improve this contract. And my point made months ago, is there going to be an improvement in strategic planning? I've been away for a week on something that requires strategic planning to a minute degree because my life depends on it. And I would look at a contract, and did in my business life, to the same degree. And I would like to understand that there's going to be a greater level of strategic planning. Thank you.
Who would like to take that?
I'm a little bit, the methodology, question, I'm not sure how to answer that. Maybe you can be more specific on that. And
well, you were suggesting that within the methodology that there was a sort of cut and paste situation, but what I'm not understanding, because we don't have any hard detail here, is what level of methodology needed changing or reviewing or restructuring in order to make the methodology workable within the terms of the contract.
Are we talking about the 12-week?
We're talking about the 12-week and the whole contract, because if 12-week is part of that contract, then again, that comes back to strategic planning, and we should be working backwards. So we've got the strategic planning for such things that might require a 12-week period. And so it's a methodology from day one that needs to be applied now, and how there is flexibility within the whole contract in order to do that. And that's, to my mind, is strategic planning.
I think maybe because when I was referring to methodology, I was referring to the collection methodology that we employ. So where before we were operating in a wave pattern and now operating in a near and far methodology. So it's not necessarily cut and paste, because every council and every contract is, while collecting a bin is the same, you have a bin, the rubbish goes in, the truck comes in and picks it up. Every council has its own nuances that need to be taken into account for that. So hence why we've looked at this option of looking at the near and far sort of collection methodology as I referred to. With regards the 12 weeks, is we would always give ourselves that time to that's normally when a driver's learning a new area. This is born out from experience from multiple contract managers and in my own life in previous contracts, is it takes time for that driver to learn where he's going, and therefore increase his times on what he's missed, where he needs to go. So that's why we say sort of it'll take around about 12 weeks for things to settle back down to being the very good service that you were receiving prior to the Tom, versus the I would say very, very good prior to the Tom and very good that we're receiving now, because we are still collecting over 99% of the borough currently with our new collection service that we have. So it's just ironing out where those kinks are. I'm not sure if that answers your question, because I don't think it has from there.
No, I do know it is a wider strategic point that I'm trying to get to, because clearly the driver shortage is throughout. I mean, I've traveled the length and breadth of this country fairly recently, and this is something that affects just about every industry, so I fully understand that. But I do think that things that arrive in this 12-week block are not going to go away, because simply the whole country is in a situation of strategic depletion, if you like. So my real worry is that we're not seeing the investment and innovation from you that can have a contingency for this. One has to have contingencies in every line of business, and human resources are a finite element at the moment, and in fact a diminishing element, because it's quite clear people who had jobs previously have decided after COVID they don't want to go back to work, and that's understandable. But I just think that for this contract and for a significant amount of money it costs the council, and for the fact that our customers are expecting a level of delivery, there needs to be a very solid structural strategic plan behind it all, and I just don't see that, I'm afraid.
Can I may be able to assist a little bit in terms of explaining some of the thought process that went through? So there has been some strategic planning, there has been quite an awful lot of strategic planning. So the original intention was to launch the target operating model much earlier. It became apparent that the complexities associated with that were greater than I think Serco had anticipated, so that process was delayed. It then became apparent that it was necessary because of that initial driver shortage, where we were seeing more significant driver shortages than we currently are, and we were seeing on the contract drivers leaving to go and work for haulage contractors that were paying significantly above normal market rates. There was then an intent to bring the target operating model in. And we as an authority decided that wasn't prudent because of the summer months, and we didn't want it in the busiest time. We've looked at the dates in September so that there is enough light for the operatives to work safely, but also so that we're not pushing back the issue of an inefficient round system that was creaking and causing problems for both crews and Serco generally. To be resolved. And I think in terms of the resource question that came in earlier, around, is this a resource issue? Serco have increased the number of rounds from 10 to 13. That in part is a challenge because you're immediately needing 3 extra drivers to run those rounds. I agree to a degree. I think Serco have not looked as innovatively as they could have done for a solution to driver recruitment and retention. But then again, they're working in a local authority environment where we pay them a set amount of money that doesn't vary except for in relation to an annual increase in terms of inflationary costs that are linked to a basket of indices. So that'll be to pay to fuel cost, to a whole range of things. Whereas some of those competitors that are out there, for instance, supermarkets, where we know that one supermarket last Christmas or before Christmas was offering a £2,000 sign-on bonus for drivers, and increased rates of pay, can put a penny on the price of each pint of milk and cover their costs. And I think the challenge is in this environment is that it is a fairly fixed fee cost or contract from that potential income source. There isn't the opportunity to just say, well, we're going to charge you more, because that's not how the contract works. So I think we have to, yes, absolutely. We are pushing as officers, and I know that Serco are pushing in terms of trying to recruit additional resource. I know that they have had a new drivers start on the contract and have inducted them, and then those drivers don't turn up. And there's nothing that Serco can do in order to, generate people into an industry which effectively is, has its attractions as a driver, because you get up early in the morning, you do your shift, you go home, during the afternoon, rather than other tramping type activities where you might go, in terms of haulage activities where you may go away overnight or even all week in your HGV in order to go away. So there is a certain market of drivers as well that will be interested in this type of activity, and it's about how Serco make best use of the agencies and the other opportunities to attract and retain drivers. So when they had that issue around driver retention, they put in a market allowance for drivers, which increased the pay rate in order to be more competitive, and that's something that they have, that is now normalised, I think, into terms and conditions for those. It's in the process of being normalised, and so from that perspective, they have done a lot in order to try and address this. But I think they've probably not been able to do what some of the more market-led, market-driven opportunities have been there for people who have been able to just increase its price on commodity.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, I was coming down the A1 last night, and just about every main haulier, talking the big hauliers, had a sign on the back of their lorries recruiting and looking to recruit. So I fully appreciate that point. And I do think maybe, and this is not what I would normally find myself saying, that in the times that we're going to be finding ourselves, maybe we as a district council have got to look to help Serco to be innovative on that level, because, a contract formed, nearly a year ago, or negotiated over a year ago, probably in the times that we're about to hit, is a contract that's going to need to be looked at from each party's point of view, good and bad. And if it means that we've got to take a hit somewhere to help to make sure we can provide for our customers, then that's something I think any district council throughout the country is going to have to consider.
Thank you. Can I just park that point, just because I want to pick that up towards the end, if I may. So if we can just move on to Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was losing the life to live then with all this. I suppose my point of view, really, mine are very blunt questions. The first one, I suppose, did you actually see this coming, and did you not consider beefing up your call centre and maybe putting across North Norfolk and Serco extra training in to deal with all of this? And the second point I'd like to make is, I believe that our website is going to have an app for people to email about bin collections. Now, if I was to complain about my bin not being collected, do I go to North Norfolk, or do I go to Serco, or do I go to both? I'm a bit confused as who to report it to, because if you go to, if you do what I did, I was transferred from Serco to North Norfolk, and I believe that we're going to put an app on our website. So who do I go to, or do I go to everybody?
If I pick up the second part of that question, so we as a district council have obviously a very good website. On that website, there are a number of reporting forms that you can use in order to report activity. And one of those is around a missed bin collection. So you can report via North Norfolk District Council's website. That report is then sent through to Serco. Serco contractually provide the customer service element of this contract and provide a call centre to do so. There is a number that's published on our website, and Serco publish on all of their information and details, which is a number that residents should call to report missed bins. It just so happens that we've provided an additional route through our website, because number of people who will look to find out information, the council's website will be their first port of call, and it enables those people to self-serve and to do everything in a single issue. It's part of our digital transformation. It's part of our channel shift people to people, so they're able to do activity at a point in time that's convenient and suitable for them. And that means that having a form on our website, if you come home from work 6, 7 o'clock and the call centre wouldn't necessarily be open at that point, you could still report your bin in a timely manner, and in a manner that's convenient to you. So that's why we have the web form on our website. And in terms of the route through, it is telephone calls, etc., should be through the Serco call centre number.
Can I just add, if people do phone the North Norfolk District Council telephone number and choose the option for reporting a missed bin, that call is automatically routed to Serco as well. So.
Thank you. You haven't answered my first question.
I think that's right. Yes, I think did you see it coming bit?
And we did beef up the number of staff in our call center. So we do still currently have additional staff within the call center to deal with the increased number of calls. We would expect to have seen some disruption in the service. As I've said, we did a huge service change here. So we will always expect to see a disruption, which is why we did beef up the call center beforehand as far as it goes.
Councillor Blathwaite.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen. If I be maybe a little bit more parochial, do you have a contingency for rubbish, public rubbish collection points to deal with fine weather, bank holidays, in our resorts? Because this is the only bit of real contention I deal with through your contract, is that the public bins in my area have not been emptied as efficiently under Serco as they were by a previous contractor. And I believe this is true of resorts right along the coast. Thank you.
So just unclear, you're referring to the public litter bins in these places?
Yeah. These are public litter bins near beaches, particularly.
Okay. So those fall under our street cleansing department, and it is something that we should be undertaking. From there, we have again been working from what I understand across the summer to try and make sure we can get those services where we need them to be. I'm coming into this as just coming in new, so I don't have all the details on that, if I'm honest with you, so I can't answer your question in full. But it is something that I'm working with the local team to ensure that it doesn't happen next year, because we will be coming into, again, peak tourism seasons coming up during the summer. And with coming out of COVID, we've seen a lot more tourists in the area probably this year than we've seen in the past. So it did have an impact on us, and it is something that we just will be taking into account. And I've already started looking at contingency plans for next summer to make sure that we can cover that.
Yeah, I was actually hoping you could be even more flexible, Simply because, I mean, if the bank holiday, if it's a sunny Boxing Day, we will be inundated along the coast and the rubbish will pile up because it's winter and it might be a winter service and that isn't satisfactory. So I would ask that you could be even more flexible if you could, please. Thank you.
Certainly something that I'll take under advisement from there.
Maybe that's around a response flexibility, demand response thing where perhaps there could be a better eye kept on the environmental conditions that are likely to give more trade at the coast. That would be helpful. Okay, thank you. That I think is I didn't notice your hand, but I will take it as the last one.
Hello. I've got 2 points really that I wanted to drill down a little bit on.
But hopefully not too long for too deep.
Well, I think we need to know
I'm
the
conscious of the
information,
time,
Chair.
that's all.
So the issue for us in Sheringham, and I have to say in our main areas in Sheringham, it was an excellent changeover. It was the Lokes and those unusual places that and unadopted roads that were the issues. My concern is not so much about customer service on the telephone, but the online responses that people were getting. I was encouraging people to go through our reporting form, etc., rather than phoning you. But they were getting a response quite quickly afterwards saying, your bin is not going to be collected, put it out for the next collection. Now, I'm just wondering, how long after a missed collection should you be going to that? Because they were reporting on the day or the next day that these were bin, and very quickly, sort of within 48 hours, they were getting your bins not going to be collected. And I was just wondering what your standard is, what you would expect for a bin to be someone to go out and pick it up. I know it's been higher pressure, but it is an issue when people are 48 hours later getting that response and thinking, well, Serco can't be bothered to come out and get it really.
If I pick up the first part of your question and then hand over to George, you might want to add. So the standard position is that, well, in fact, Scott, I'm going to let you answer this one because you know better than I do.
The timescale for reporting miscollections is by midday on the second day after collection. So, for example, if collection day was a Monday, the miscollection should be reported by midday on the Wednesday. We have exercised some flexibility around that, obviously, since the changeover, quite significantly in some cases. I'll answer the other part as well, because I think it is more for us to answer than Serco, to be honest, in terms of the web form. So the web form is designed in that way. It was designed and implemented in normal times and without significant re-engineering of the web form. That's kind of how it's built. So it will advise people that if they are trying to report a miscollection outside of that time scale, that unfortunately on this occasion, they're too late to report it. The web form is designed and linked to Serco's in-cab system. So if a crew drive down a road and note that a bin is not out for collection when they are there, the system knows that that bin has been logged as not out. And if a customer hasn't put their bin out for collection, then the general principle is that we do not return and collect it. Similarly for other, what we call exceptions, so contaminated bins, things like that. So the web form is designed to, customer puts in their address, it checks the collection time and will check those exceptions. And if there is a reason why the bin has not been collected, the response to the customer is such. Otherwise, it will generate a worksheet for Serco to return and empty that bin. I think there is a facility within the system, depending on which exception is logged, that the customer can dispute that miss. I think around the not outs and the crew, or all the vehicles have got 360-degree cameras on board. So if necessary, if a customer says, well, my bin was out at that time, we can ask Serco to refer to the onboard cameras that capture everything that as the vehicle, drives down that road, and in a number of occasions have done so and have shown that the bin is sat at the the other end of the customer's driveway rather than being presented at the edge of the curtilage. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it's more about with what's been going on with whole roads being missed, that they have, you know, en masse, they've been getting that message that your bin's not out for collecting, and you know, and I've told them, "Oh, leave it out, they'll come back."
Whole roads being missed should be another matter. The web form, I think we do need to improve the web form in that respect and the feedback, but there's not a category for the crew to log it like that. So it's until that road has been completed by the crew on the in-cab system, it won't give a response to the online system. So we're trying to identify a solution to that currently.
Yeah, and it's just, it has created sort of a bad feeling about what's gone on, which is a shame.
Mr.
Thank you.
Hams, you wish to?
Are we to close? Are you drawing this to a close?
I will draw it to a close. I'm not quite sure whether
No, that's fine.
you're satisfied with that.
Um,
Over to you.
I just wanted to bring this to a bit of an end. I mean, I am grateful to all the crews out there who have worked extremely hard under quite challenging times in order to try and do their very best. This is not predominantly down to anything that they have, you know, done or do. I'm also extremely grateful to the officers here at North Norfolk who have put in an additional amount of effort in order to pick up calls, in order to respond to emails, in order to deal with quite challenging circumstances on occasions. I recognise this isn't satisfactory. It's not satisfactory from members' point of view. It's not satisfactory from officers. It's certainly not satisfactory from my perspective. And I am, and we will continue to push Serco to improve this as quickly as possible. I think when George says there is a 12-week period, I am not looking. I will be very cross. And Peter doesn't like it when I get very cross. I will be very cross if we're still seeing anything like the same level of misses. I think 12 weeks is, you know, we will see it tail off to there. So 12 weeks might be the maximum level. If there's anything like any problems that go on up to that point that are beyond what I would expect, I will be raising them at the highest level within Serco. So Peter will tell you that I regularly have conversations with the managing director for citizen services, and on occasions I speak to the chief executive officer for Serco for UK and Europe on issues, because we need strategically for them to understand the importance of these three contracts to us and ultimately to Serco's business. So we continue to work really hard to resolve that. But thank you for your questions today. We'll make sure we bring something back in an appropriate manner with some written updates for you as briefing notes for the future meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've given this getting on for an hour and a half now, and we've raised quite a range of questions. And I think probably it would be appropriate, I think, just to summarise the situation. The waste collection services that the council provides is, I would say, the most public facing service that we have. So this authority, along with the vast majority of other authorities, choose to contract the service provision out. But the one thing that we don't absolve ourselves from is the responsibility. The responsibility for waste collection rests here in this building, and it is shared across officers and members, as well as you, the contract provider. So you may well have felt that you were perhaps under the spotlight, and that's inevitable. The spotlight is also on officers and us as members, and that's probably why some of us may well be slightly more pointed in our speaking and choice of words than others. But that is the way it works. So we don't take the view that, well, we've given that lock, stock and barrel to you, Serco. We have given you a contract to provide, but we haven't given you the responsibility. And I would like you to understand that we do take that responsibility I'm sure you realise that very seriously. And that is not something that we are looking to slope shoulders on. We have to face the public. And we need the information to go back to the public to give them plausible explanations, plausible answers. And if we can't give them, then we need to be doing something differently from what we have been. And so it's all about solving problems. I'm conscious that we probably need to hear more from somebody in the not too distant future about how this is progressing. And I don't know how members feel, but I think that we need another update of some kind, and perhaps a written update from offices might suffice. I'm conscious that I don't want to bring Serco here unnecessarily if we can handle it internally. Mr. Hems, do you have a view on that?
I think it would be entirely appropriate for you to have an update given the circumstances to your next meeting, which I believe is
November
9th of November. So it's my understanding that George is now regularly within the Norfolk contract. So whether it's appropriate for Peter to come all the way from far climes, but I certainly think George would be willing to attend.
I certainly would be willing to attend.
That's fine.
I'm in the process of relocating, so hopefully by the end of the year I'll be permanently a Norfolk resident.
That's right.
At that point.
I think I'm getting nods around the members, and I think how you provide that update is a matter for you to discuss with Mr. Hems. But we would want to have the opportunity, I think, to draw assurances that matters will have improved significantly from where we are today or where we have been. So if that's the case, are we all happy to receive a note? Can I have a show of hands along those lines, please? Thank you. That looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for coming along, and for the officers for attending today. And you'll stay with us, will you? Yes, that's fine. All right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Right, moving on to item 11. Item 11 is council tax discounts and determinations for 2023 to 24. We don't have Councillor Seawood here. Who's deputising for him?
I'm quite happy to, Chairman. I mean, I will be brief because I know Sean's got to get off shortly. So he's been obviously given his time to come to us today for this item. Highlights here, obviously, we're keeping the hardship discounts in place, the care leavers discount, of course. You're aware we've had the discussion around the council around the premium on second homes. We certainly have some reservations here in terms of the beneficiaries of the additional revenue and which authorities that goes to, given the fact that we only get 8p in every pound, so 8% of the pot, as it were. So that's obviously, as I think Matthew alluded to earlier on, still to work its way through Parliament. Another point worth highlighting, we're reintroducing a discount for properties that are uninhabitable due to the need for major refurbishment. That's relatively low numbers of properties, but we are seeing more and more cases where the property owners are reporting their difficulties in finding builders, contractors, etc., exorbitantly expensive materials, and this is impacting on their ability to refurbish those properties. So that's something that's being reintroduced, and I'm certainly supportive of that, albeit it is obviously very small numbers, as you can see in the paper. I'll hand over to Sean. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to cover off from there, and appreciate you've got to get away shortly.
Anything to add?
I just want to highlight the levelling up and regeneration bill, which is linked to second homes. It's what they've included is that we have to give a year's notice, so it comes in from 2024, although the legislation hasn't been passed and obviously has been delayed because of other issues in government.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, I've got two observations actually. And I guess they relate to the title because there are two matters there that don't seem to me to fit within the title. Two items refer to premiums. So this isn't about just discounts, it's about premiums as well. So I wonder if the title ought to really read council tax, discounts and premiums determined in that period. And the second point is, of course, that the matter regarding the second homes doesn't actually fit within the financial year that you're quoting. It fits within the next financial year. So I wonder, on a matter of detail, whether you might just want to change the title of that.
Yeah, I'll take back the title. I mean, be honest, this is a finance paper, not revenues, although I do contribute. I think it's a good point about the premiums. Clearly, when this report was originally done, we didn't have such thing as premiums. It does fall within discounts, interestingly. It does class the discount legislation, although I think it'd be more transparent if we added the word premiums to it. I'll take it back to the Section 151 officer who wasn't able to make it today. So, and I think that's a good opinion. In regards to the second homes, which will come into effect from the following year, not 2023, but 2024, it's because of the legislation, sorry, the bill that's going through, which isn't legislation yet, it requires us to give a year's notice of a new one. So on the basis that we believe it will go through, it's vital that we make that decision. If members do not wish it to come into effect from 2024, then clearly there's no decision to be made. But if you decided next year, you would have to then delay it by another year.
I understand that. I was merely meaning that that particular measure doesn't fall within the 23-24 financial year. It falls in the following year. A matter of mere detail. And it's just really, I suppose, a matter of kind of saying it should do what's on the tin, and the label is the title, I guess, and tidying that up, if that's helpful. Any other points? That's a holiday.
I have a representation and an observation. The representation is from a resident who thinks it's unfair that second homers would pay a differential council tax as opposed to the business rates relief that you'd get if you had that house as a holiday let. And he'd like a similar minimum occupancy requirement for second homeowners to get around that. And the other observation is if you had a second home and you let it out as a long-term rental, changing it from a business rates relief that you would have for a holiday let, then would you have to pay double the council tax, in which case there might be an unintended consequence of dissuading people from turning their holiday lets into long-term rentals, which obviously is something that we very much like them to do.
Can you respond to that, Mr. Knight?
Well, yeah, okay. In regards to the first point, there's nothing in legislation regarding council tax, second homes, and how many days it has to be used. Currently, the legislation with holiday lets, which is obviously a business rated property, is that it's available for let for 140 days or more. Now, that decision, whether they fall into council tax or non-domestic rates, business rates as we know it, is a decision for the valuation office, which is independent of us, that comes under HMRC. So we report things to them, but they make the decision whether to change it or not. Some of you may not be aware that the government has decided to look at holiday lets going forward. So as from 1st of April 23, rather than just be available for let for 140 days, these holiday lets will actually have to be used, actual use. They're using the data from this year. So that's ongoing at the moment. It's evaluation matters, not ours. Although, again, we can report properties we'll come across to them to look into and revalue. I have discussions with my portfolio member, Eric Seaward, and I've mentioned to him, I'm sure most of you are aware, that most customers will look to see what is the best deal for them in regards to second homes, holiday lets. There's a number of issues there. Holiday lets, for example, on business rates, they can also get small business rate relief. So they don't actually pay any charge at all if they're entitled to that. I believe over the course of this year, because of the information being received about usage and actual usage of holiday lets, I feel that from next year, we will see a shift in properties that are not used and they will come into council tax. That I think is just a natural way of the legislation changing. And I think that's what's going to happen. Equally, a year on, if we support the second homes doubling up the charge, then clearly you're going to get some customers who decide that's not for them. And so in a year's time, 2024, if we approve that and it goes through, then I think you'll find some customers again will be looking at what they need to do to change that situation. We are looking at ways to monitor and investigate these changes, because obviously at the moment we do gather data like the valuation office, and sometimes if we review and inspect and monitor these closely, maybe we can go back and challenge that. That is a cost to the council in time, but that is something I know we are looking to do going forward to try and ascertain whether they're in the right class. I hope that answers your question.
Is that an affirmative? Right. Okay, thank you. Any other points anybody wants to raise? Oh, sorry, Councillor Withington.
I think this might help with the previous question as well. If someone becomes a landlord in effect by renting out their second home, the council tax would then be the responsibility of the tenant. It's most unusual for a landlord to do bills as council tax, etc., and utilities all included in a bill. So I think it could serve in that instance. Increasing the council tax may serve to encourage those second homeowners who don't use them very often to let them out, and then they won't have the council tax. It will be the resident, the tenant's responsibility, not the second homeowners.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
But then you're penalising the tenant, because they're then having to pay double the council tax. No, they're not. They're just paying one council tax. Okay, that is okay. That's great. Thanks.
At the normal rate. Yes, that's right. Okay, any other points? No? Okay, so we've got these recommendations ahead of us listed here 1 to 6. Are you content to accept those recommendations? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? I've got Councillor Heinrich and Councillor Withington. Can I have a show of hands then, please? That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, just for clarity, they do go onto the other page.
Oh, yes, they
7
do.
and 8, so for the purpose
Thank
of
you.
the meeting. Thank you.
Yes. I must look at the 2-page model rather than, yes. Okay, so they go to 1 to 8. Okay. Right. Moving on then to item 12. This is the Rural England Prosperity Fund, and this is a paper that is intended, I believe, to brief us on the this fund. Is that right? Okay. And I know Councillor Kershaw isn't here today. Does anybody want to speak at council level?
I mean, I'm happy to introduce it.
Well, if there's no councillor here to do so, then it, I guess, falls to one of you, either.
No,
You'll
that's
take
fine.
it. Okay,
That's fine.
Mr. Quick.
Yes, I'm happy to introduce this paper. It's intended really to give overview and scrutiny early sight of this fund. This paper sort of essentially provides an overview of the fund, sort of an indication of the timescales, and a suggestive process for how we'll take this forward. The fund is essentially a top up to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which you will recall was announced and launched in the summer of this year. It's available specifically to local authorities in England, and it's essentially a successor to the EU model for rural funding. Obviously, we are in a transitional period. Previously, we've had EU structural funding, which has obviously then been disseminated and gone through various means to come down to a local level. We're in a change in phase where we now have, in theory, more control over that money. And this is essentially the rural element of that. It's intended to fund capital projects, so there isn't any revenue element to it. And there are 2 predominant focuses. So it's either to support the local business community or communities themselves. And the ambition of it is to help improve productivity and strengthen the rural economy. The indicative allocation we've been told is 1.457 million. Locally, that's the second highest amount. So Kingsley and West Norfolk have fractionally higher. Some areas that don't have a rural, such a rurality, have received none. So Norwich, as an example, Norwich City Council have received no allocation. Early indications is we'll receive 25% of that amount. This is unconfirmed in April next year. And then this will run for 2 financial years. So we'll receive the remainder, which is anticipated to be 75%. That's what we've been told in the second year. The model that we adopted for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund in terms of how we would determine the priorities of that or interventions was via a local partnership group that's how we determined the UK Shared Prosperity, which was made up of a number of key representative groups like Norfolk Chamber of Commerce, the LEP, DWP, essentially representative groups rather than necessarily individual businesses themselves who potentially could be beneficiaries, of course. So our recommendation, which we are asking to be endorsed today, is that we adopt a similar model, possibly supplementing the existing local partnership group with some more rural members or bodies. And the next thing we need to do is by the 30th of November is to submit essentially an addendum to the application that was made under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It's relatively light touch. All we would be required to do is identify some of the key rural challenges and the interventions or like priorities from a menu essentially that the government have provided to us. So the model that we propose then is that we work with our local partnership group to bottom out those challenges, get a good understanding of what they are, and to talk around and discuss and conclude the interventions that we propose and put forward in that addendum on the 30th of November. And then we would then hopefully, it then goes into the process where we'd hopefully hear whether that's been approved in some point in January or February. The money is though essentially guaranteed, as best we can say that, because so therefore there's no competitive process to this. We just need to put a good solid proposal forward. And if they have any further questions or want to, the government will essentially come back to us and work with us to resolve that. So the money is, for all intents and purposes, in the bag. It's for us to obviously make best use of. But if there's anyone's got any questions, very happy to answer them. We are still awaiting further government guidance from the government, so we might not have all the answers at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got questions. Councillor Housden, Councillor Withington and Councillor Holiday. And Councillor Batikofer. No others at the moment. So, Councillor Housden.
I just wondered, Mr. Chairman, if there's any chance that the Norfolk Sustainable Community Fund can have any input into this and whether it will receive any funds of any sort.
Okay, I can answer that. So under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we've indicated that we would look to put some money into that pot. So we have an allocation already assigned for that because we recognise it's a very important way and a good model already that's established. So why reinvent the wheel? But that aligned very well with some of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund in particular. And this one will have a slightly greater rural focus and gives us an opportunity to support a different angle.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Withington. Could you put your mic on, please?
Is it appropriate that we see this before it goes off? Because at the moment we're just taking it on a basis of a recommendation. I don't know.
I guess that's an interesting question. If we were looking at this from a proactive point of view and a pre-scrutiny point of view, then we would want to. But I'm conscious the timescale is actually quite tight.
So that, yeah, unfortunately, that is the case, which is why I wanted to actually kind of bring it to the table and give an early airing here. The realities are we will need to turn that around in a relatively tight timescale. However, certainly my intention would be to bring back a summary paper, probably to an appropriate committee, will summarise the interventions for both the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which hopefully we'll hear we've received or our investment plans approved rather within the coming month. So essentially cover both of them in one paper. But it probably won't be. Unfortunately, it's unlikely to be in advance of the submission due to timescales.
You can see what we're up against.
As ever, it's the position we're always in, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. Right, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be interested to know who the additional stakeholders you might be calling in, because that's to me very important, given that it's rural versus the other partnerships which seem much more urban. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're still bottoming them out, but I think it would include bodies like the CLA. I think we're probably an integral area that we currently got covered. But I unfortunately haven't sort of brought the shortlist with me, so unless Rob can recall some of the others.
Well, no, bodies like the NFU, rural business kind of representative groups, if you like, that recognise the characteristics of North Norfolk particularly. But I mean, there are a wide range. There's also a fairly broad range of rural issues that the fund can address, from so-called nature-based solutions, which is solutions to sort of environmental issues, but you working with nature. Those are kind of supported within the scheme, but it's also really focused at farm diversification type projects. So we'll need to recognise that sort of breadth in the organisations that we bring to the group. The group's role will really be to sort of understand, oversee, and hopefully help to disseminate information about the fund.
Happy with that?
I was just hoping that there wouldn't be too much emphasis on tourism, because we have quite a lot of that already, and I think it would be nice to balance the economy a bit by the nature-based solution sort of thing. Sounds really good.
I take that point as well. Tourism is pretty well covered in our submission on the local investment fund for the Shared Prosperity Fund, so the rural bit of it won't specifically be focusing on tourism.
Yeah.
Although many farm diversification schemes tend to be tourism oriented.
I guess that means that if there is a tourism opportunity that falls within the rural definition criteria, then it would qualify. I think one would want to make sure of that, and it wouldn't go off in a direction that took it outside of the rural definition.
So under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, much of the focus was on about promotion of the districts and sort of similar. But with in terms of the sort of ticking the tourism box, should that be considered a priority under this one, then it would be about supporting businesses, perhaps as an example, farm businesses who are looking to diversify. So potentially that could be an area, an intervention, but as I say, we haven't determined any interventions yet. That's a discussion to be had with the local partnership group.
Well, the substance of that question was very much one that I was also going to address as well, because I think the inclusion within that group is really important, that the rural sort of stakeholders, represented bodies, and I'm heartened you've mentioned the NFU, but there are others, and I think that we just need to make sure that we give them the opportunity of putting forward their proposals and ideas. So that's okay. Councillor Batakova.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. On page 35 of the report, it says that more detail is still anticipated from the government. Is that still the case?
It's inevitably the case that they often launch the fund with a sort of slimmer prospectus, but there's usually then one or two webinars and lots of feedback that we'll individually give, and inevitably that results in some kind of key questions. Such questions in this case would be, who can be the beneficiaries of this? So there's a little bit of clarity, a little bit of detail that's not quite there yet.
I mean, that is my concern, that yet again we're placed, applying for money for funds from central government when you haven't been given all the details. You haven't been given even who these beneficiaries should be of this money. And it just seems to me that it's another example of the way our current government is spending funding. I'm pleased to see, nonetheless, that some is coming for our rural communities. And the other question was, I note that in here it says that some of the money can be directed for providing staffing. But you said light touch. The paper here doesn't imply light touch of the amount of work that's going to be required. Which is it? Is it going to be light touch, or is it going to be a lot of work? Because if it's going to be a lot of work, how's that going to be funded? Is that covered?
So the application itself, sorry, just to clarify, then the application itself is relatively slim in the sense that we haven't got it's not on the scales of the levelling up bids that you recall, to obviously a tremendous amount of written material. We only at this stage, I mean, like such in the sense that we only need to outline the challenges and the key interventions. We won't need to outline the specifics of how we will deliver that. But you're absolutely quite right. There is no when it comes to delivering grant funding, which I think we have some pedigree in this council in doing so, particularly in recent times. You cannot underestimate the level of resource and time and officer commitment. I can talk personally on that. And unfortunately, there isn't any funding actually specifically identified within this fund for the administration of that. There is an assumption or an ask from the government at the moment as it stands, although this again possibly could be clarified in the FAQs, that we will use the allocation from the UK Share Prosperity Fund, which they've allowed us up to 4% of that fund, which is, I think I've referenced here, is about just under £50,000 that could be used towards supporting it, supporting both of them. Now, this one is likely to be more intensive in terms of the grant delivery. So that is a risk that we acknowledge that as it stands, we will have to try to embrace. But we are presently recruiting a sort of more senior role who will oversee both of the funds, because we recognise this is an important amount of money. It's £2.6 million between the two. So I'm looking to hopefully recruit an economic programmes and funding manager to oversee this, and then we will use that 4% to put someone in place to help us support the administration.
Thank you. I just think maybe, Mr. Chairman, we need to do something to central government about the number of grants that come to councils, not just ours, that do not come with the full details. People can already be applying for this money. I see that the programme opened on the 3rd of October, and yet they don't actually know whether they're doing it in the right way or for the right things, because the detail's not confirmed yet. And I think if we scrutinise ourselves and don't want to accept things when they're not properly organised and the controls put in place, then surely central government should be subject to the same controls. That's all. Thank you.
I think that's probably a wider issue. I think we've kind of got to deal with what we've got in this particular situation. Not saying that your point isn't valid. And I think actually the launch of this was the 12th of September. So here we are on the 12th of October, a month has gone by before we're kind of seeing it. And we've only got, I guess, 7 weeks maximum in order to get this thing done. So I take your point, but I wouldn't like to see resource kind of siphoned off to kind of deal with that when we kind of got to deal with the matter in hand, because we need to capture that money. That's
absolutely. Like I said, I am pleased that the money is coming to the rural communities because they need it.
So sitting right alongside that point is the short fuse and you know, all of those kind of things, in my view, and this is only a personal view, doesn't generally lead to the best of decisions being made. And I think we had some concern when it was the earlier fund, when it came through this committee, was concerned about the lack of balance across the district and how all of that happened. So it's right that we should look at this, but I'm not sure that we've got the means by which we can achieve that perfect or more equitable distribution. Okay, Councillor Brathwaite.
Yeah, thank you very much. Could I just ask, there seems to be a real crossover with Elms, and also it seems to be associated with GRAMS perhaps, and I'm just wondering if we are is this likely to affect Elms projects, and can Elms projects feed into this? And I would also ask if local access forums can be involved in this. Thank you.
I think it would be unwise of me to comment too much on Elms because there's a lot of debate about those publicly at the moment. I'm not sure quite which direction they're going to take. There's a good deal of support within the farming community, I think, for those schemes that have been developed and are delivering, but there's also alternative, methods being considered about the future. This isn't really about that. This is a scheme. This particular fund is a scheme to support rural enterprises or businesses that are operating in the rural economy, to help them to flourish, diversify, improve productivity, etc. So it's not really about land management and farming practices. It's more about the sort of rural economic activity, if that answers your question in some way.
Well, I visited a project last week, 2 weeks ago, which was an Elms project, which was about diversification of farm buildings for local enterprise and access. So it seems to be the same thing.
I'm not sure of the match funding regulations relating to this. I'm not sure if Stuart knows whether that's an outstanding question, but whether, a scheme that's funded under one scheme can also benefit from investment from another. That's something we can take away and explore. But I would say that I don't think an Elms type scheme would be excluded from applying, but whether there are kind of matching issues that prevent that, I don't know. I don't understand the Elms schemes well enough, I'm afraid, to know whether they are kind of self-contained and therefore you can't bring other government match funding into those. But we can take that away and have a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Any other points? No? Okay, we're all done on that then. We are asked to note the contents of this report. Are you content to do that? And can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. Right. I know it's 11:30. We are tantalizingly near the end. Are we content to continue? Good. Okay. Are we? Well.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Our number is remarkably low, isn't it?
The quorum is 4. Yeah. So we are.
Right. So long as we don't get too many others leave.
I do think with an agenda this length, we should have a break after 2 hours, but I'm content to go with the majority. I do think.
You would like a break?
I think
Okay,
just a 5-minute break even.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
That's no problem. Right. So with that adjournment over, back to the agenda item 13, which is the North Walsham High Street Heritage Action Zone. And this effectively is a resubmission of, I think, most of the papers we saw at last meeting and had our observations. We passed our observations and it's been resubmitted, I think, taking into account most of those. But further than that, we've heard representations this morning from Mr. Hicks, and I think we just need to bear in mind what Mr. Hicks had to say to us in consideration of this paper today. So over to you, Officer Young.
Yeah, thanks. So in Councillor Kershaw's absence, I'm happy to introduce this. I mean, it's ostensibly the same paper as previously, but the formatting issues have been resolved. So you have the risk assessment in its complete form, not broken up as it was in the last one. We've also taken account of the comments that were made about reporting risk, and we took that to include sort of budget issues in relation to each of the work streams. So the Heritage Action Zone is a complex programme of different interventions, sort of physical improvements to the town centre, grant schemes for building improvements, and cultural programme engagement and those sorts of things, as well as the specific work on the Cedars, which is a building that the council owns. So in relation to each of those, we've kept the narrative. I know some people felt they didn't want that detail, but in the time available, we felt it was easier to just supplement the report with that additional information. So in relation to each of the work streams, there's a box which details the budget, the expenditure to date, and then any residual risks. If there's nothing in the residual risks box, then there are no surprises, no residual risks. By residual risk, I mean we've identified risks extensively throughout the programme, and then we've looked at what mitigation there may well be, and then the residual risk is what results after the mitigation is in place. So that's those are the ones that we need to remain concerned about, if you like. So I don't think I need to speak very much more to the paper, but Stuart and I'd be very happy to answer questions. And I did meet with Mr. Hicks together with Councillor Kershaw roughly a week ago. I think it was last Thursday. Understood his issues from a property owner's perspective, actually, which was very interesting, and someone who's investing in the town. And his thoughts and views were perceptive. They chimed quite well, actually, with the ambitions of the scheme in terms of the things he was saying about the historic nature of the town and the assets, and our need to bring those to the fore. I'm not sure I'm best placed to comment on his sort of desire for free car parking. I think that's a much bigger issue. But I would say that in relation to the one comment he made was that the town is not going to be accessible to vehicles until the spring. That's not true, actually. The town is accessible to vehicles at the moment. The scheme that Tarmac, who are undertaking the placemaking scheme, are managing traffic movements within the town very well, and we've had some very good feedback about that. But also during the scheme and afterwards, there is ample car parking within the town centre, very proximate to the marketplace, and certain spaces for blue badge holders are being retained on street in the marketplace as well. So I think there was some sort of possible slight inaccuracies in what he was intimating, but the thrust of his argument was that you need to retain business in the town in order for it to thrive, and that is what is behind the Heritage Action Zone programme. But it's also addressed in the so there will be a loss of some on-street car parking, but that's being compensated by free 1 hour. So there are 30-minute free on-street car parking spaces at the moment. I think there are 15. We're compensating that by 16 1-hour free spaces in perpetuity in 2 of the town centre car parks that are close to the marketplace. So basically we are retaining the same level of access, and indeed you could argue that it's enhanced access, but it's also vastly enhanced access for people with disabilities or mobility issues who are sort of navigating the mix of traffic and pedestrians at the moment. So happy to, Jenny joined us as well. So we're happy to answer any questions about the report. Thanks.
Okay, well, I've got 5 questions actually lined up now. I've got Councillor Heinrich, Councillor Batikofer, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Housden and Councillor Mancini Boyle. So, Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of things really. Regarding the car parking, I think we need to make it absolutely clear that at the end of the works, the amount of free parking within 2 minutes walk of the town centre will be radically improved, and as will access for older disabled people to be able to move around the town centre much more easily. Picking up Mr. Hick's point on shops, it has to be accepted shopping in small towns is changing and has been for 30 years. We can't look back at North Walsham as it was when I was living, there originally back in the 60s and 70s. The future of that town centre is for residential, leisure and small specialist shops. And that means that you need to make it pedestrian friendly, which is what we're doing. The parking isn't an issue. North Walsham is very well endowed with parking. And in terms of free spaces, we have rather more than some other towns in the district. And that's constantly told me by fellow members. If I can just turn to the report, if I could just refer to the Cedars for a moment. Do we actually have a scheduled completion date there, firstly? Secondly, has the works so far been inspected and signed off in terms of the quality, and is snagging being dealt with? And thirdly, are we making progress with tenants? Thank you.
So Jenny, if you've got any further update, please let me know. But in terms of a programme, now it's been difficult. There have been sort of variations to the contract along the way for the Cedars. We changed the heating system. Once the works had began, we decided that a gas heating system was not going to be appropriate, and an electric system on the basis of carbon emissions would be far preferable. So we made that change. There also have been discussions about the requirements of any future tenants for IT equipment and the like. So there were some delays in confirming some of the electrical fittings, the sort of so-called M&E parts of the building. We've resolved those. We're now working with the contractor on a final programme, which I believe they are going to prepare for us imminently. So that once we've got the final programme, we'll then incorporate a snagging period. So we won't be doing snagging until the works are completed. But there's a principal designer which the council has appointed, and he's responsible for overseeing the quality of the works. We have reminded him on occasions that as a key part of the Heritage Action Zone project and a very visible high profile building for the council, we do expect those works to be completed to our full expectations in terms of quality.
Thank you. That partly answers it. I mean, and if I can see certain issues around, say, flashing on the roof, which is supposed to have been completed, then I do have some concerns. Secondly, the timescale and things like repair and repainting of windows. We are coming into the winter, yet that work has not started. And that is very noticeable to residents as well. So could we have some update on when that is going to take place, please?
If I can provide that after the meeting, I'm happy to do so. A colleague of mine, Neil Turvey's the sort of key point of contact for that project, and he's in our property services team. So I'll ask him for an update to be provided to the committee and to local members. And sorry, and the points about flashing, which you did notify us of earlier this week or last week, those will certainly be on the snagging list. We've notified the contractor of those already.
Thank you. Can we finally, can we assume that it will be completed by the end of the year as been previously notified?
That's the assumption that we're working on. It was a November completion date that we were targeting. But I'll provide that confirmation.
I imagine you'll keep an eye on that. Councillor Buttigieg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, it's important that we take into consideration what Mr. Hicks had to say this morning. But I think it is detailed well in the report, the amount of car parking that's going to be available. And I do think that, yes, they've got rather more than some other towns across the district might like. I think I understand though. I think my main point about that is I was in town on Saturday. It's not, North Walsham's not a place I go to that often. And I have to say, I thought, why don't I come here more often? When I went there, despite the building works, I thought there's a lot going on in the town. But I think we need to increase our signage to help people identify where the free parking is. Because I didn't see any. I mean, for me, parking wasn't a problem, but I can understand for those who it is a problem for, I think that's a real issue that we need to make it clearer to residents and to other people visiting on the, like myself, who don't go very often. Hopefully local residents know where to find it. Then I was looking at page 42 when it says about Historic England, historic area assessment. Can I just confirm that it says we've had a ground penetrating radar survey done and well, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, dendro something underneath. I'd be most interested to understand what that actually is. But it says expenditure to date 0. I'm assuming those have been undertaken by other bodies and that's why there's no expenditure. Thank you. Okay, no, that's great. And my last question was, we're focusing so much on the heritage of the town, which obviously it has great heritage, but can you tell us what the take-up was on the events that happened in September, please, that are detailed at the top of page 43? Thank you.
I'll pick up the first question, if you like, car parking signage. So there has been a bit of a state of flux. Cabinet took the decision to allocate a certain amount of free car parking for the duration of the works. So 2 hours free in one of the identified car parks whilst the works were taking place, to get across the message that the town is very much open for business and that, despite the disruption, the market has been relocated onto one of the car parks and is operating to the satisfaction of the town council, and the market traders actually are delighted with it. I'm slightly concerned they might be too delighted with it. So that has impacted on the amount of car parking available on Thursdays. So to compensate for that, there was a view that actually there should be some complementary or sort of concessionary car parking available. So that was identified as being on Munsley Road car park. Unfortunately, the surface of Munsley Road car park has been rather badly broken up from inappropriate vehicles accessing it in the past. So the improvement works to Munsley Road car park were brought forward in order that can then operate as the free car park, if you like, for the duration of the work. So the signage, I'm afraid that there has been an issue because we were going to have Munsley Road car park as the free one, and then we ended up having to have that as Vicarage Street car park while the works to improve Munsley Road car park were taking place, and then it will swap. We'll improve that. I'll feed that back to the team managing car parking.
I think for me, the point was most particularly about the Bankloke car parking, because that is the spaces that are nearest to the shops for the people with mobility issues, and that wasn't clear.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes,
and that for me was the most important bit, because that's the bit that's really replacing those 30-minute slots.
Yes, quite right. Sorry, I misinterpreted.
No, that's all right.
Those are the permanent sort of post scheme free car parking spaces, if you like, which we absolutely will need to put messages out about, and yeah, we'll carry on. We'll pick up on that.
I think that hopefully should provide some reassurance to businesses in the town.
Yeah, the research, incidentally, not all heritage action schemes have that element added. Historic England were extremely excited, I think it's probably fair to say, about North Walsham, what it has, what was known about it, but what sort of secrets seem to be hidden. So they were really keen to invest in that program of research to supplement what we're uncovering, and that will help to feed into future events and interpretation. We're undertaking an interpretation and signage sort of scheme within the town. So it's interesting to find out what Historic England have found, and we've been working with them to try and use that material to the best of our ability to sort of maximise the opportunities that the scheme presents. The events, I don't know whether Jenny's got an answer to that at the moment.
Sorry. Just to say that we had Heritage Open Days. Unfortunately, we had to cancel one of the weekends because it was just after the sad passing of Queen Elizabeth II. So, and it was during that period of mourning. So it was a difficult decision, but we just thought we would cancel that one. But we had already gone ahead with the first one. So that was very well attended. We had 15 people came along to a sort of open tour of the building. So they went to see the Cedars. And actually on the dendro, I'll just call it that, research, they apparently are there today. They're going to the Cedars specifically to go up into the roof space. And what they do is they'll take they'll drill a plug of wood, and then they go away and they sort of analyze, I think it's almost like the rings of trees, to age and date the timber. So they have been on other occasions, but they're back today in North Horsham doing that piece of research. And on the programme of cultural events, we've had a lot of success there. I don't have all the details of the numbers, but I know the schools in particular, there were 80 children went out from different classes from 2 primary schools, junior school, and took photographs all around the town. And subsequently, the person who'd delivered that programme, she's done some training with the staff at the schools. They've put in a supplementary bid, and they've now been awarded some funding to purchase their own digital cameras. So going forward, every year or whenever they want to, the young children from the schools will be able to take advantage of that. And they've produced a guide so that the teachers can use them as well. So it's a sort of legacy really, and that's just one of those projects. But they've had lots of events. They've had concerts within the church, orchestras live, have been into the schools, and they've written songs, and then they've gone and performed them to parents and carers at the church. So we're really pleased with the work that's been going on the cultural programme as well. Just to sort of point out, that is actually separately funded. It's funded partly by Historic England and the Arts Council, and it's managed by a separate sort of independent consortium that's been established.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thanks very much. That's answered one of my questions actually. So I was looking at the risk register and looking at the somewhat bullish from now in the future changes, and one of them was the change of 9 for the cultural programming engagement, which obviously you have done some work on. But there's a change of 11 from inherent risk to mitigated risk in terms of conflicted or inflated expectations from key stakeholders, which I couldn't actually see the mitigation would be that effective. And there's another one with a delta of 14, which is funding not committed within the funders' timescales. And I just wanted to be reassured that those actual mitigated residual risk wasn't too aspirational. Thank you very much.
I think I'll deal with the last one first, but feel free to chip in. In terms of the funding is secured, so there is no residual risk of us not getting the funding. The challenge is to make sure that we can address, construction inflation and sort of manage the scheme and sort of do the value engineering to ensure that the scheme fits the budget. So that's our challenge, but the funding is secured. So there's no residual risk in relation to us obtaining the funding. And in fact, at the end of the previous financial year, there were underspends on other Heritage Action Zone schemes around the country. So we had a very sort of last minute opportunity to bid for some additional funds, which we did, and used that to purchase some materials to de-risk the scheme. So we had some additional funding at the end of the last financial year from Historic England. Sorry, I've forgotten what the first question was about.
It was about the conflicting or inflated expectations from key stakeholders, which is number 29.10 plus point. No, that's the date rather. It's
so stakeholder views, I suppose, about the scheme, about any scheme, change when the scheme, goes into its various different phases. So stakeholder expectations at the beginning may well be, pitched at a certain level. And once you start to deliver something, they can either prove to be pleased with it or I suppose react in the contrary way. We did extensive engagement prior to the design work for the placemaking scheme, and we had some very good levels of response, and we had some very positive responses actually to the designs that were put forward. So we're now implementing a variation of those designs, and we hope that we're meeting stakeholders' expectations. I mean, that is something which we will monitor and respond to some extent. But the designs for the placemaking are certainly, they are recognising the feedback that we had. I'm not sure if there are any other outstanding stakeholder matters, but what we have decided to set up now that we've moved into a more of an active kind of implementation stage, we're going to set up a stakeholder group for sort of representative groups to come together to improve the communication and to sort of monitor the impact of the scheme while it's being implemented. So that's going to be set up imminently. We've sort of recast the project board and set up that local stakeholder group to ensure that we kind of got our finger on the pulse, as it were.
Okay, right. Councillor Housden.
Thank you. If I can just go to page 49, the risk register has got the delays and restrictions, including material shortage, labour shortages and cost rises. I wondered what the original contingency was in pounds, shillings and pence, and the rescheduling element of the contingency and the reprofiling budget. That's one question. The second question on the programme time, I understand also the LAP and the HE funding is time sensitive and therefore has to be utilised in the current financial year. The third question is, what's the business take up, given Mr. Hicks's comments about market towns earlier on this morning? Thank you.
So if I lead on these, but obviously if my colleagues want to come in and supplement my answers, feel free to do so. Contingency, I'm afraid I can't give you the answer to that. I presume you're talking about the contingency for the placemaking works, but I will. I don't know if Jenny has an answer. Then perhaps now's the time, or we can check with Tarmac.
I haven't got the figure in front of me, but I think it was, we were talking about, it was 15%, I think.
Contingency rescheduled and reprofiled budget in the status, and this was at the 6th of April 22. So I really would like to know, the element of contingency, whether it's gone up or down, or whether it's needed to go up, or whether it's gone down in the rescheduling, and how that has an impact on the time of the contract and completion.
I'll try and provide a written response to that.
Okay.
Obviously, contingency is reevaluated as projects are being delivered, because the closer you get to the end, the better fix you have on the need for contingency and the levels. So it should diminish as you get to the end of the project, but I'll try and get an answer back on that one.
Perhaps you could provide that answer to Matt.
Yep.
And circulate it, please.
Yep.
And whether in the timescaling in the context of LEP and HE.
Sorry.
And the timescale, the programme time, because on page 44, any delays to placemaking work programmes could affect completion requirements.
Sorry, yes.
To spend LEP budget, and then further down the last bullet point is HE and LEP funding are time sensitive.
Yes.
I can
sorry,
confirm that the Historic England funding on placemaking, we are due to submit our second quarter claim by the end of this month, and I think there'll be a few £100s left, so that's completely spent. So we have achieved all the spend on that, which we're really pleased with, because that's ahead of schedule. And obviously going forward, we'll be prioritising all funding will be prioritised against the enterprise partnership funding.
And that's the LEP funding.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I
And
could I just supplement that with that? So I had a senior reporting officer interim meeting with Historic England, their sort of regional team, last Monday, and that was they were calling basically all Heritage Action schemes to deliver their high-level messages from government, which were along the lines of there will be no new schemes being established now. So if one of your projects is not likely to be implemented, then it's too late. You can't supplement it with anything else. Another of their messages was there will be no carry forward of funding after financial years. And that there were other things, but they made it very clear actually that none of those lessons applied to the North Horsham Heritage Action Zone. They were very comfortable with the position that we were in, that we had allocated not only the Historic England funding, but we'd actually allocated a significant proportion of our match funding as well, which includes the LEP funding. And we did that by pre-purchasing materials. That was one of the means by which we ensured that we'd spent in a timely way. So we had a sort of clean bill of health, but they we had that conversation in any case.
That's fine. And just on Mr. Hicks's point on the take up and occupancy within the market square, is there any view on that at the moment?
We've got an anecdotal view. So when I met with Mr. Hicks last week with Councillor Kershaw, we also went to a couple of other properties that were vacant within the town, and we had a discussion actually with one of the landladies, or the landlady of one of them. We asked her about whether what she was doing to fill the property, and she'd got an idea of a pop-up shop initiative which she was operating on the day that we visited, which was very good. She said she'd had a good level of response to that, but actually she had had a good number of inquiries from people who wanted to take the shop on. And actually the reason it was vacant was because the shop that had previously been there had outgrown the premises. So that was she was quite optimistic actually, which given the current economic circumstances we were sort of buoyed up by really. There are other properties that we're aware of in the town that are vacant, and we've got a dialogue with the property owners, not least of which we're funding to improvements to some of them. But there has been some churn whilst the works have been taking place. Jenny, I don't know whether you've got again information about some of the ones that we have been working on the building improvement grants for.
Yes.
But a couple of those have come back into use. So
yes, so there was a property that was vacant. They applied through the Heritage Action Zone scheme for building improvement grant, which they received, and that's been fully claimed and the work's been completed. So they now have occupants. I can't remember the name of the organisation that's moved in. So very quickly it got turned around from being vacant, refurbished, and now it's been occupied. And there's also a residential property which has just been completed as well. So we've now got projects that have been funded through the scheme for improvement and are now being occupied. So vacant space is definitely being brought back into use.
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, a very significant one of those is the former bank building as well, Barclays Bank, which is now the Phoenix project, and that's benefiting from the Heritage Action Zone building improvement grant.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Mancini Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, it's an excellent report, nice and concise, not too much waffling. My concern really is we're coming to the end of this project. Are you conscious of how much officer time has been placed on this project? Can you give me any idea of that, please?
I can't quantify it, but certainly we made an assessment of that when we put in the original bid and we put in the funding to support those posts. So Jenny's post is actually supported by, in part by the HAS grant. So we can certainly quantify that. Because of the complexity of this programme, and I think the kind of high profile of it, there has been a lot of officer time. And that's across various different departments of the council. So this scheme is not just about the physical improvements we're making within the town centre, it's the ramifications of that. So we had an extension which then dealt with the creation of a bus interchange or a bus station basically on New Road, which was in some ways opportunistic. In order to remove buses from the town centre, we needed to find a place where they could safely go and turn and wait for passengers. That was a huge amount of work because that impacted on one of our car parks. So there were and the refurbishment of the public conveniences at that site as well. So you know, I'm not going to pretend that this has been an easy or sort of a light project to deliver. And in some ways, we have expanded it to take advantage of other things, like the Munsley Road car park resurfacing that's taking place at the moment. So it's been challenging, but we have had the resources both within the council in our own team and with those additional resources that we've brought in from the grant. But I think the point that Councillor Butikofer made earlier on about you know, grant funding is great. We can spend it on capital things that achieve good outcomes, but unless you've got the money to pay for the administration of those things, it can become very challenging. So I think the timing of this at the beginning was extremely difficult because Stuart and his team were dealing with the COVID related grants at the same time as we were trying to build this project and engage in it and go through the design phases. So it's not been easy, but I'm confident that we've had the resources that we need, and we've got the budget to fund the resources for the remainder of the programme.
Thank you. It wasn't a criticism of my in case you thought it was. It's obviously long overdue, and my question was, I assume you as you were doing the whole project, you thought it was a good idea. While we're here, we might as well do this and we might as well do that, because it's more cost effective to do it that way. That was my point. It certainly wasn't a criticism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, and lastly, I think from me, on page 49 on the risk register, the first risk reference 2.2, in the right-hand column, where it's got the information on status, and halfway down the commentary there, it says a small number of objections raised. How many is a small number?
I think this was about the TRO, and I seem to recall it was 6.
You seem to remember it was 6?
It was 6. Yeah, 6.
It is 6. Okay. Yeah. It's just that it's probably good to put 6 and shorter to put 6 than a small number. It always raises in my mind.
Everything's relative. 6 may be a big number in
6.
some
okay
instances.
So the two objections that we've withdrawn, I assume there's still 4 still standing.
Well, this was an exercise undertaken by Norfolk County Council as part of their regular traffic regulation sort of statutory consultation procedures. So at the end of that, they need to consider the representations that have been received and then determine whether or not to approve the scheme or not. They approved the scheme essentially, but you know, they usually have a dialogue with the objectors to see if there's something which, you know, can alleviate their concerns if it results from a misunderstanding, for example. So they had those conversations and were confident that the scheme could commence.
That's fine. That just nails that one for me. Thank you. Okay. If we're all done on that, then I think we are asked to note the contents of the report, firstly, and to second, to endorse the process of developing the fund, and so it goes on. I won't read all of that out. You've got it before you there. There are 2 recommendations. Can I have a proposer for those 2 recommendations? I've got Councillor Withington and Councillor Mancini-Boyle. A show of hands, please, in support of that. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on swiftly then to the item 4. I've got that one wrong, haven't I? So we're required only to receive and note that report. I beg your pardon. So item 13 is to receive and note that report. So we've done that now. Okay, thank you. Cabinet work programme.
Yeah, I don't have much to say here. It might be helpful while Steve Hems is here. The engagement strategy is on there for November. We'll note that that was pre-scrutinized quite some time ago. So just check that that is still planned to come forward in November. Is that the case?
I'll just need to check progress on that on the basis that we're out to consultation at the moment. I need to check when the consultation comes back compared with the requirement for this paper to be with you.
Okay.
So can I come back to you on that one, Matt?
No problem. The other thing to mention is obviously at the last meeting there was that pre-scrutiny on the performance management framework. There were no major suggested changes, so that's going forward to cabinet in November as well. So unless the Democratic Services Manager has anything to add, I think that's everything on the cabinet work programme.
Okay. And the committee work programme?
Just a few things to note in the months coming up here, and I appreciate I might not be able to answer this without Steve Blatch present. Obviously, one thing that we've been very conscious of and have been chasing for some time is a project review of the Sheringham Leisure Centre. I understand that next month will be the final summary of accounts with the contractor. I don't necessarily know at this stage whether accounts close down in November means we get a report in November. I don't necessarily think that will be the case. I think once we get those, it may take some months to then get that. So it might be after Christmas, but rest assured, I'm definitely keeping an eye on that and pressing people every month to try and get that report as soon as we can, because obviously it remains, for one of the biggest projects we've ever undertaken, we need to see a summary of that. Something else that we've got on there is we haven't heard from the coastal protection team for a long time. I think they've been undertaking a lot of work, so we've got on there an update from them on what they've been doing and some of the important projects that are underway. So I think it'd be useful to hear on that. And then also just to note, we did have the beach huts and chalets originally on for last month. I've now spoken to the officer responsible for that, and we're hoping to bring that forward in December to look at what the effects of COVID have been on occupancy, what the revenues and occupancy is at, and also hopefully by bringing it forward in December, if there are any recommendations for changes, then they could potentially be put in place ahead of the summer season.
Okay. Councillor Whittington.
Thank you. In regards to the coastal protection briefing, yesterday, some of us went to the Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme, colloquially known as CTAP, briefing, which was really interesting. And I don't know, as part of that, it doesn't sort of fit in that heading, whether that's included or whether we should be looking for something a little bit further down the line, but they've certainly got a lot to tell us and talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's open really. If members would like to hear some more on that, I'm quite conscious of the fact that I think the last time we looked at coastal protection schemes was the sandscaping scheme, and that kind of team just seems to soldier on and get work done. So if there are any suggestions of things that you would like to hear about and projects you would like to hear about, please do email me and I can make sure that we kind of include those in that report.
Okay. Any other comments in relation to the work programme? Councillor Buttigieg.
I'm just asking here, are we still having the car park usage monitoring report?
That is the plan, subject to the availability or the resource availability of officers. Obviously, that is a report that was previously prepared by the former Section 151 officer. It's not something that's been done by the interim. I will be speaking to her and seeing if she can get that completed in time, but certainly won't fall off of the radar completely. It may be delayed, but I will seek to ensure that's added on. Something we did note in the previous budget monitoring report is that there has been a large increase in car parking revenue. So I think it'd be helpful to see what that has been exactly.
I think that's really important because it's a key source of income for this council, and it will help budget discussions later on.
Councillor Holiday and then Councillor Harrison.
The ambulance response times monitoring, which is February, could we invite the ICB and the Ambulance Trust to come to that?
Yes, yeah, we can, yeah.
Thank you.
Steve, I'm sorry, just back to Serco again. Are we inviting them back in between now and, because obviously our tenure
that
is
scheduled.
slipping away like the sands of time.
So I think what was agreed was they would come back in at your next meeting, which is the 9th
Fine,
of
okay, so-
November.
Yeah,
And
okay.
we will get them to provide
Yeah.
an update.
Sorry,
Yeah, I think you've
forgotten.
you've got Mr. Roach coming along on that occasion as well. So, right, any other points in relation to the work programs? No? Are you happy then to note those? A show of hands, please, to note those. That was a holiday. Are you happy to note those? Thank you. Thank you. That is unanimous. Right, I think that completes all the items on our agenda today. Thank you all very much indeed for your input. I appreciate that the waste contract matter took a lot longer than one might have hoped or expected, but we did cover a lot of ground, and hopefully we will have something better to report next time around. So thank you very much indeed, and I formally close the meeting.